Good afternoon, welcome to LL Bean. This is our 24th annual Spring Fishing Expo. This is our program, and we have copies up here, and you'll find them elsewhere in both of our stores here. And this will be your sort of roadmap for both today and tomorrow, and we hope you'll spend the weekend with us. And this is our 3:30 presentation, and it's called Late Winter and Pre-Spawn Patterns for River Smallmouth. And our presenter is new to LL Bean. It's great fun when we put these programs together. We blend people we've seen before as presenters, and every year we have some new folks, and it's always fun to have new folks as part of our speaking roster. He's a pioneer in the emerging sport of kayak fishing. He's the owner of Blue Ridge Kayak Fishing. He's published a number of DVDs on the subject of kayak fishing for river smallmouth, and he's also published articles in numerous fishing publications. And in addition to representing Blue Ridge Kayak Fishing, he's here this weekend representing the Wilderness Systems Kayak Fishing Team. Please welcome Jeff Little.
Is anybody out in the audience kayak fish already? We get a show of hands. Okay. Give me an advantage of kayak fishing. Why do you fish out of a kayak?
I fish out of a kayak because I can get in a little bit closer to the shoreline.
Right.
I like the access of it. I can get underwater, so I can't get into. I'm a small person, so wading can be a little iffy sometimes for me. If I get in kind of a lot of rocky water, it takes me down.
So access, you're absolutely right. Access is a big deal. I appreciate your participation. There's a copy of my summer river smallmouth patterns. Another person who fishes out of a kayak already? Yes, ma'am? What's an advantage? Another advantage beyond access?
Well, access would be probably the main one, and I don't really know how to handle a boat, but I can handle a kayak.
All right, they're easy to use for sure. You know. All right, there's a copy of the fall river smallmouth patterns. Anyone else who fishes out of a kayak and knows another advantage of fishing out of a kayak? Yes, sir.
It's easier to hunt down the trail.
Yeah, it is. It is more lightweight for sure. You know, there's a number of reasons to get in a kayak. Stealth is another big one. I know out on the Chesapeake Bay we fish for striped bass, and some of those bigger boats will come up and just shut down the bite. But if you're sitting there in a kayak, they'll bite all day long. So lots of reasons. It's inexpensive. Compared to getting a bigger boat with a motor and all the complications with maintaining a bigger boat. And for me, I'm going to go back to what I was doing yesterday on the drive up. I didn't drive 10 hours all at once. I stopped and I fished along the way, of course. I was on the Susquehanna River. We were having our ice out flood. All the ice was coming down the river. It was muddy and trashy, and it was a mess. But even though it's cold, spring's coming, and there was a lot of activity. There were a couple bulbs green coming up through the leaves. I had a family of mink I sighted up to the edge of the river, and there were mink running back and forth, and they would get this close to me because I was just sitting still trying to catch some smallmouth, and they didn't mind me. Saw some wood ducks come in. They landed in the eddy right in front of me. Really, it's the experience of being closer to the water. So that's sort of one of those intangibles of kayak fishing that you don't necessarily get in a bigger boat. Like you said in the introduction, I'm Jeff Little with Blue Ridge Kayak Fishing. I'm on the Wilderness Systems fishing team, and I actually used to teach a class. It was an American Canoe Association class called Basic River Kayak, and I want to talk a little bit about how I got started fishing out of the kayak. Here I am with a couple striped bass from the Chesapeake Bay. There's a winter river smallmouth. That's the 21-inch smallmouth I caught, I think, winter before last. When I got started doing this, I just bought a boat, went out and bought a kayak. I think it was an Old Town Loon 138. Took it out, went through a whitewater section on the Potomac River, Hadn't really taken a class or anything, just said, I'm going to go out and do it. And I figured out pretty quick. Well, I'll just tell you what happened. Went through a set of really big haystack waves. I mean, they were, you come through a chute and, the haystack waves were probably, you were going up and down on waves that were this tall. And got my heart pounding, felt really exhilarating, and I got through, and I got a little wet, but I was okay, and I felt really proud of myself. And I said, I'm going to turn around and take a picture of that just to show somebody how cool that was. And I put the boat, I slid the boat right up against this log. I said, all right, I'm going to slide right up against here. And what happened is all that water piled on the upstream side, and flip, I was underneath that undercut log. I lost my glasses back before I got the LASIK thing done. I lost my glasses, so I popped up and I couldn't see much. I banged my head a good bit. I maintained the paddle, and yeah, I saved the fishing rod. But I lost some other gear. And I popped up and I said, I need an education. I need to learn how to do this safely and more effectively than what I just did. So I took a beginning whitewater class. I took some swiftwater rescue classes, and I eventually earned American Canoe Association certification as an instructor. And I got good at it. I got good at it from the standpoint of all the little tricks that you need to know to use the kayak as a fishing platform. I did learn some of the whitewater maneuvers. I learned how to, proper paddling form. All of those things really do play into being an effective fisherman in a kayak. So I taught people one-on-one with Blue Ridge kayak fishing. I did it on the weekends, and it wasn't my full-time job, but I enjoyed doing it. And at some point, after 10 years of doing it, I burned out on it a little bit. I said, I still want to teach this subject, but maybe not, with students out on the river. And that's why I went to the DVD series. And the first one of those is River Kayak Fishing Skills, and that's a video version of all those paddling skills that I taught people online, or taught people on the water, can now watch the video and learn that stuff. But certain things you really have to learn out on the water, and that's why I would encourage anybody who's getting into this is to get out there and learn about things like this. Right here we have an angler. This is on the North Anna River down in central Virginia. And this is what's called a strainer. This is a big tree that's fallen down into the river. And here he's going to duck through, and he got through okay, as did I, to take the picture. But you need to learn, to keep an eye out for these things. A strainer is anything that the water's going to go through, but you and your kayak will not. So you always have to keep an eye downstream. We got through that one. This one, not so much. That one went across the whole river. This is up on the North Fork Shenandoah, pretty far down 81 from here. It's one that we had to get out and completely take around. So there are some hazards out there, and taking a class and learning about them is your best defense, so you know what those hazards are. Here's a nice big smallmouth, and the reason I use this picture is behind me. This is a low head dam. This is in downtown Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. The state capitol building is not far from there. You got a train depot over on the left. It's a busy place, a crazy place to catch a nice big fat smallmouth like this. But people die here. Every year there's someone that dies on this low head dam, the Dock Street Dam. So these low head dams have what are called hydraulics. And I'm going to use, I think I'll use this, the front of this to explain, front of the podium. Say the water is coming over here, and as it pours over, it goes down, and it has a sort of circular motion, okay? And it's a mixture of air and water. And in that mixture of air and water, your life vest, I have mine right over there. I always wear it when I'm on the water, but it's still not going to do the same job in that less dense medium of popping you up to the surface. So you can get hydraulics on the downstream end of low head dams like this, and you really just need to portage, you need to go around. But smaller ones can form in the many, many ledge rocks that are in a river like this. Just a normal rapid will have some hydraulics. And the way that you want to run it, if you do run a drop like that, and you would never run a dam, but say it's a ledge drop, is perpendicular to the drop and just fast, going over it. So you shoot right over, you know, the hydraulic that you could get in trouble with there. So.
How do you get out of that hydraulic if you get stuck in it?
You don't always. A buddy of mine who lives off of Goose Creek in Northern Virginia, he lives not far from a dam, and we had one of these big ice out floods, and he kept hearing this boom. Every minute and a half he would hear a boom. And eventually he said, all right, I got to find out what this noise is. He went down to the dam and would see this full-size tree, something that you and I couldn't reach around, and it had gone over the dam and was caught in the hydraulic for days. It had polished all the bark off of it.
Wow.
So that's why you want to stay away from these low-head dams, portage them, go around. People who whitewater kayak know about these and really set up people with throw bags on either side of it. Should something happen, they're ready to rescue their friend. If you're not prepared that way, you know, it doesn't go so well. Other hazards out on the river, there's rocks, and you know, if you're drifting down and you bump into a rock, you have to lean into the rock so that the current will hit. Unlike what happened with me with that log when I wanted to take the picture, the current will hit the underside and go down. If you're leaning into it, you're not going to flip over on the upstream side. That is something that requires some practice, because it is counterintuitive. When you hit something sideways in current, your first instinct is to, there's the hazard, lean away from it, and then you flip on the upstream side. When I did the classes, I would have people look away from it and drift with current until they hit, and I'd had it set up a shallow rock that they would bump into, and then they would know they were going to do this and lean into it and hug the rock. So that became a trained response. You have the muscle memory of leaning into the rock. Other hazards out there, dehydration and hypothermia. They're ones that we don't treat, they're not physical hazards, they're physiological hazards that you need to know about. I'll touch on hypothermia because it's timely for this time of year. We have talked with a lot of people over at the Wilderness Systems booths, and I hear people talk about going out, sometimes in big open water, in these open kayaks that can take on water. I'm a big proponent of self-bailing, sit-on-top kayaks. So if you take a big wave, it's going to go right out the scupper holes instead of fill your boat and then you're soaked. When I was out yesterday, when I was out last week on the in Baltimore on the Patapsco, and it was windy and cold, and earlier this winter we went out on a day that was a high of 17 degrees, and we caught some good largemouth. But we can do that because we have good gear. I have it's a dry suit where there's latex gaskets at the wrist and at the neck, so that if I fall in, my hands and my head are wet, and that's it. I'm going to show you something right over here, so that if you do get wet and you submerge, you have a dry bag, and this is loaded with a complete set of clothing. Should I get wet? If I had a hole in my dry suit, I've got wool socks, I've got fleece, I've got a fire. I'm not going to pull it out now, but it is a kit that I can start a fire like that. And we've had to do it out on the Susquehanna River when a buddy of mine fell in, and he was in trouble quick. He was not functioning as he normally should because he was hypothermic. And I've been hypothermic before, and it's sort of miserable. You must have a dry bag with a complete set of stuff to get yourself dry, because if you're even a little bit damp, you're going to continue to be hypothermic. So prepare for that with a dry bag. Dehydration, You just need to, it's something that kind of sneaks up on you. You just got to make sure on a hot day out there, even if the water is cold, keep yourself hydrated. I'm going to go through a couple brief concepts, they're paddling concepts. There's my shot for talking about using a sit-in as opposed, or a sit-on-top kayak as opposed to a sit-in. This is one that I was salvaging the boat. It was one that a student of mine pinned sideways in a rapid, and I went back for it a couple days later, and it was still in the same position. I actually had to perform a rescue, and it was early on when I did this, and we got him out. He was fine, but his boat stayed there for 4 days until the river came back down. So sit on kayaks, sit on top kayaks. Here's another student doing something called torso rotation. I'm going to grab my paddle over here and talk about really being an effective paddler in terms of getting the most power. Pretend I'm sitting in the kayak and not standing here. Torso rotation means that when you put your paddle blade in the water and you turn to the side, you're twisting your entire body back, as opposed to if you paddle just with your arms. If you paddle with your arms, you're primarily you're going to blow out your arms. Your arms are going to fatigue. Whereas if you do torso rotation, and again, this is something you will learn in a class if you take a paddling class, is really what I'm pushing you folks to do. You get the use of muscles from your knee to your nipple. It is all of these muscles working in conjunction to propel you forward. So you're going to be a more powerful angler and paddler, and you're going to get to those spots quicker if you're using torso rotation. The other thing is when you insert the blade into the water, that you're almost like you're spearing it in. You pause for a second, and then you go back. And there's 3 parts to every paddle stroke. There's the catch, the power phase, and then the recovery when you bring it back. If you have a good catch, you're going to have a good seal on the backside of this blade. If you have a poor catch and you go straight into the power phase, you're going to hear a gurgling here. Okay? The analogy I like to use with this paddle, it's a nice adventure technology paddle. Very lightweight. You want to get as lightweight a paddle as you can afford. But it's like a sports car, okay? A sports car is a high-performance machine that works very well when used properly. It wouldn't work very well if you hooked up a big trailer to the back of a sports car, would it? You hook up that trailer to the sports car every time that you don't have a good catch before you go into the power phase. In other words, when you're using your torso rotation and bringing this back, and you're dragging this mixture, this cavitation, this mixture of air and water with it, it's sapping all of your energy out of the paddle stroke. You're less effective. So catch, power, and recovery. Again, take a class, you'll learn a lot more about being a more efficient paddler. You're going to get to the fish quicker. And you spend more time fishing. And Roy here, this is actually one of my students I mentioned. He's just demonstrating good torso rotation. He's all the way around to the side. So, this was on that 17-degree day back in January. We had a high of 17 that day that I caught that. It's from I'm not going to say what river it is, but it's a river down in Virginia that is heavily spring influenced. That water temperature was about 41, 42, okay? Most of our rivers have been frozen over all winter, but because that one had all that spring influence, it stayed open. That day I was in this Tarpon 140 that you see right here rigged out. And I filmed that day. I have beyond the DVD series, I have a video channel called Tightline Junkies Journal. And if you guys would, before you leave, grab a business card off my kayak. It's right in the center there. And look at some of those videos. Just like the DVDs that are instructional in nature. And I teach different fishing-related concepts. This day I was teaching the process of finding spots like that are heavily spring influenced that you can fish, year-round. But let me talk a little bit about different boats for different types of water. That was sort of the exception the day I used a boat that long and skinny on water that was small. And I'm just going to play opposite sides of the fishery. That boat I actually have set up for fishing on the Chesapeake Bay for striped bass. It's a longer, skinnier kayak, which is going to make it a faster kayak. And I'll give you an example of why it's important to have a fast kayak. Say you're out in the striper are around, but they're only near the menhaden or the shad or whatever it is they eat up here, and you'll see the birds working out, in an area, and you're going for it as fast as you can. But if you're in a short, a short blunt-nosed kayak, it's going to take you forever to get there. Whereas this is like it's like a rocket. It's going to get there in no time at all. The flip side of this is I wouldn't have a boat like this when I go for river smallmouth, because it's not as maneuverable. I mean, I did the other day, but I was bringing it up here to show you guys. It was not ideal, especially for a flooded river. We have, down there at the Wilderness Systems booth, we have a Ride 115X. Excellent boat for river smallmouth fishing. Very maneuverable, very wide, very stable. So you really do need to match the type of water that you're going to be fishing to, your boat to that type of fishery. There are some that kind of straddle, can go either way, where you can fish them in a variety, but there's compromises with each design. But the advantages of a boat like this is speed. The disadvantages, less maneuverable. And the flip side of that is a shorter, rounder boat is very maneuverable, great for fishing in whitewater or just moving water situations. But the disadvantage is going to be very slow. So you have to think about, hey, do I have the right boat for the type of area that I plan on fishing? Basic accessories, if you're getting set up. If you're getting set up for fishing, you need the good paddle, like I mentioned. You want to get one as lightweight as you can. This is one that has the bent shaft, and it's ergonomically designed to paddle well. But this bent shaft, as opposed to the straight shaft, one of the biggest advantages, when I have my rod in one hand and this paddle in the other, I do a lot of one-hand paddling. And on a river smallmouth fishing, you're going to snag on a lot of things. Say I have my bait snagged up where you're sitting, and the river's pushing me back. How am I going to get, I'm snagged on the bottom, how am I going to get back up there to free it? Well, one-hand paddling, I grab it in the center. That's what all this duct tape, and it's actually a pool noodle in there. I grab it there, and I put my elbow in that little notch and one there. And I'm actually one-hand paddling, clawing my way back up to it. And then I'll put it down, and when I sit in the kayak, because it's that bent shaft, it stays right there. A straight shaft will slide off. And then, I'll reel up as I go. So that's my, little plug for the bent shaft paddles. The other two that you definitely need the accessories. I mentioned one, the dry bag, so I won't talk anymore about the dry bag. But we'll talk about this. The life vest. I had a buddy who fished the Susquehanna River a bunch. Here we are. This is up on the Susquehanna River, a place called McKee's Half Falls. Nice big 21-inch smallmouth. Here's a really old picture of me. I got a largemouth out of the Potomac River. Anyone notice something different about that picture than all the other ones you've seen?
Straight shaft and no life.
No life vest is where I was going, but yeah, it is a straight shaft.
Weird. And no beard.
It's right here.
No beard.
Yeah, no beard. But here's the life vest. And I have good shots. This one isn't that good, but I have really good shots that I won't use in publications anymore because they're old photos with me without the life vest. Okay. In February 2001, I lost a good fishing buddy. He wasn't a kayak fisherman. He ran a jet boat in the Susquehanna River, and he went fishing in February. On his birthday, he was by himself, which wasn't unusual for him. And he didn't come home. And, you know, he called, or his wife called me and said, have you seen Skip? Called his son, and no, we haven't seen Dad. His son went out the next day and found, with his jet boat, and found his father's jet boat anchored out in the middle. And you know, it was neatly tucked on the back seat of his seat of his jet boat, his life vest. So you gotta have them. You gotta get one that fits comfortably. If you're annoyed with it, if it rides up here and chafes, if it's not fitted correctly, you know, either get rid of it if you hate it, or get it adjusted. Get someone at the store to help you adjust it so that you don't even know it's there. I'm a big proponent of these whitewater style, you know, low profile ones because, you know, they're comfortable. They're comfortable and they stay out of your way. So you got to get a life vest that you're happy with. All right, now I'm going to transition more from the paddling into things and talk more about fishing river smallmouth. This was about this time of year last year. We're up in a creek that flows into the Susquehanna River, and my buddy there is catching I think he was a 19.5-inch smallmouth on a soft plastic rigged on I actually have a bait company called Confidence Baits, and we make jig heads and soft plastic specific for river smallmouth. And he was, my buddy Tom was catching that fish there. Creek mouths are on the bigger river systems. The smallmouth that live in the rivers in the spring will go to those creek mouths and they'll run up in some of these tributaries. So this time of year, maybe a little bit later, you know, the pre-spawn movement is to the creek mouths or near where they're gonna spawn. If you fishing, you know, through the winter, and I got the winter DVD that you guys were watching before, and somewhere in there, and also on my Tightline Junkies Journal video channel, there's a video or a chapter of this DVD that talks about how to, from moving from summer into fall into winter, dial in on the spots of the river where the river smallmouth they winter over. And the common denominator is that there's something in there that is it protects them against heavy flow, in particular during that ice out flood. Because when you have these ice out floods, it's probably one of the more stressful things that they're going to endure, except for maybe the spawning. The spawning is pretty stressful on them. But if you think about when you're paddling your kayak, there's certain areas where it's shallow and the current is going pretty quick. Well, the fish have to swim in that and burn a lot of calories in that same kind of spot. They're not going to want to be there in the winter when their metabolism is slower. They're going to want to be in those deeper pools where there's not a lot of flow, that when you have that big slug of ice and well, like yesterday, trees and trailer homes coming down the river at you, they need a place to step out of the way, okay? So typically they are deeper holes with much less current. This time of year, they're going to move from those spots in the direction of where they will spawn, and the bigger fish will move there first. So it starts like this. You have the fish that are still in the winter holes, and I caught the biggest one I caught yesterday coming up here was a 19-incher. That tells me that the big fish are still in the winter holes, but they'll get to a point where they get antsy and they'll move to the tops and the bottoms of the winter holes. Okay, and they'll stack up in those spots, waiting. Usually it's for that first really warm rain, and then they bolt. And winter river smallmouth fishermen who've been pounding these big fish out of these concentrated holes are usually kind of scratching their heads saying, they were here last weekend, now they're not here. Or they say they're not biting. No, they're biting, they're just biting somewhere else. And that somewhere else is, if you know where they spawn, you go to where they spawn. Usually in a river like the Susquehanna, it'll be a series of, well, like a rock garden or a series of ledges or something that affords them spots where there's protection from current, but there's enough current moving through to keep it oxygenated. They put their beds on a hard bottom, like a hard gravelly bottom, that if there is a high water event, it's not gonna wipe out all their eggs or their fry. But conversely, if the river gets very low, it's a spot that's deep enough that it won't be dry. So it takes some time to figure out where they spawn, but if you're around enough in the spring, you'll see them guarding a bed and you'll know, okay, this is a spot. From there, usually you move downstream to the first example of deep water that you're going to find immediately downstream from there. And they'll hang out there until they jump up on the beds and they do spawn. Okay, I'm going to talk about pattern development, and this is a striped bass that I caught. It was about this time a week ago. This was caught we were trolling these jerkbaits. That was an X-Wrap jerkbait, and it was actually a buddy of mine who's very good at trolling that was teaching me the concept, or his system of trolling for striped bass. And that one, I think, was in the mid-20s. He got several that were over 30 inches, and we got it all on film, which was great, because that turned into an episode for the Tightline Junkies Journal, which you can subscribe when you guys get home. Grab the card, like I said, and watch that and learn how. And his name's Alan Batista, who's a fishing buddy of mine down near Baltimore. Trolls for these bigger rockfish, or stripers, as we say up here. Why I put this up here, I didn't come here to do a presentation on striped bass though. I came to do it on river smallmouth fishing and kayak fishing. But what is the same with any kind of fishing is that pattern development is how you're going to catch more and bigger fish. Now, pattern development is something I taught in the kayak fishing classes that I did years ago. It's in the first DVD I did, the process by which you develop patterns, and it's the basis for all of the seasonal tactics DVDs. A pattern is a set of conditions in which you catch a fish that once you figure it out, you can go out and replicate. The process is that you catch a fish, you go to the location where you caught the fish, and you make raw observations. How much current is there? What is the structure? Is there a drop off there? Or is there riprap just in one little spot? How deep is it? Is it warmer water? You look at your depth finder and you pull up onto a spot and you're like, whoa, it's warmer water coming off that flat. You just make raw observations about the location. Current, depth, substrate, whatever you see, whatever you can observe, you make those observations. And then you look at what your presentation was. You make observations about your presentation. In this case, it was very specific. Alan was going back and forth over what we were seeing is schools of shad that we were in 10 feet of water. They were somewhere in the middle of the water column, and we were running through them, and he was hooking up and I wasn't. It was very frustrating. I go right next to him and we troll, and it's okay. He'd catch and I wouldn't, and it was frustrating. When we went to a different area, and it was 30 feet deep, and we were over schools of shad, we could see him on the depth finder, and he would hook up and I wouldn't. And I said, all right, what's the difference in the presentation? He gave me the same jerkbait that he was using. And eventually I figured out the difference and I made observations about his presentation, and I kind of picked his brain a little bit. We're trolling at the same depth. We're using the same lure. We're going over the same schools of shad, and he was going 2.8 miles per hour, and I was going through a lot faster. And you can tell on your depth finder how fast you're going. And I looked and I was like, yeah, I'm going at like 3.1, 3.2. He's like, you got to slow down. You got to go a little bit slower because that trolling speed is critical. And that's one of those observations about, that feeds into that pattern development process. Now, the next thing is, in pattern development, you catch a second fish and you look for those commonalities. He caught lots of fish and I made observations about location. Well, one thing that didn't matter was how deep they were, because we were going, or how deep the water was, because he was catching them over 30 feet, he was catching them over 20 feet. Okay, throw out that observation. We were over shad every time. Well, that's pretty critical. We're going, and once I started going 2.8 miles per hour, and that particular jerkbait. So it's a set of common denominators in fish that you've caught, and then you go out and you duplicate that presentation and find a duplication of that location. So that's pattern development. What I'm going to talk about from here on out is specific patterns for river smallmouth from now, which is the end of winter, through when the fish spawn. And it really, what I want to do is go over each of the rods I have rigged up. Actually, we'll start with jerkbaits, because I just pulled up a picture of a nice Gianata River, it's a tributary of the Susquehanna up in Pennsylvania. That's I think a 5-pound, 2-ounce smallmouth. I call it a jerkbait. A suspending jerkbait, similar to what we were catching the straight bass with. And what we do, I don't know if some of you that watched the DVD I had playing earlier, any of you see my kids catch some fish? Yeah. My 6-year-old is better at fishing one of these than most adults I try to get to fish this properly in the winter. Because I tell him, I say, Sawyer, chuck it out there, rip it down, and I might get this caught on something. I knew it. And let it sit. And that dead stick presentation, that's not coming. And here it is. I want to get it stuck in the fish's mouth, not on the carpet. I'll holster that. That dead stick presentation is pretty critical. You cast it out there, you reel it down, and you let it drift. And usually, if you're drifting in your kayak, say the current's rolling this way, and it's over there, and you've ripped it down a little bit, it's going to drift if it's in the same current, the same speed you are. And you don't move. You don't twitch it. It's going to, a good jerkbait like this, and this is a Lucky Craft Pointer 100 in Aurora Green Perch. I've caught more 5-pound smallmouth on that lure than I have anything else. You dead drift it through the current, and they will come up on it. And I've watched them with someone else fishing one, where a fish comes up and he'll pace it and he'll go right along with it, and then they twitch it because they see it happen, and then the fish says, "No, I don't want that. It didn't look right." But if you let it dead drift, it's almost like you're in a staring contest with the fish. And if you blink first, or you jerk it, you blink first, and he lost interest. So dead sticking jerk baits. Now, if you do it from an anchored position, or say you're wading and you're going to do it downstream, I usually do it with the bait caster, but I'll put it out there and I'll let it drift down, and I'll follow it with my rod tip down, almost lowering it down in the current, and I'll thumb the bait caster and then swing it all the way up and engage the reel, and then follow it down. So it's the same presentation, it's just different ways. If you're drifting with it, or if you're stationary because you're anchored or you're wading, let it drift unhindered. So dead stick on a jerkbait is one of my favorite ways to catch them.
How are you hooked on to that? Is it a loose knot or a swivel or whatever?
The jerkbait comes with a swivel, and I have a Palomar knot here. I'm glad you brought up line. This one's kind of faded, but if you look at my reels, you'll see a lot of this bright yellow braided line, and this is 20-pound braid in bright yellow. And the reason I use the bright yellow is so that I can see the hit before I feel it. Okay, I always keep my eyes looking at that braid, and sometimes you'll see the line is moving with that jerk bait, and then it stops, and I'm still moving, and it's like that doesn't look right. Boom! There's a fish. So I have that, and then leading up to the bait, this is 10-pound fluorocarbon. So attaching the 20-pound braided line, the bright yellow stuff, to the 10-pound fluorocarbon is an all-bright knot, or you can use a uni-to-uni knot. Now those are hard jerk baits. I also use soft jerk baits like this right here. This is one I made myself. This is a One that I inject these myself in my garage. It's a Confidence Baits product. It's where confidencebaits.net is where I sell my DVDs and my fishing lures. And this is a dragon head. This banana-shaped weight here, and on an extra wide gap hook, and there's a little screw in the nose. And dead sticking, I will also dead stick a soft plastic jerkbait. People think of, you know, the sluggos or the flukes or any of these soft jerkbaits as warmer weather soft plastics, where you'll cast them out and you'll quick twitch them back, and it's just not too many will fish these like a jig, and it's a very overlooked presentation to cast this out and let it sit on the bottom and keep your line taut and just wait for that fish to look at it long enough that it says, okay, I'm tired of just staring at it. I gotta tell if it's real or not. And you'll feel that signature smallmouth dunk, and you know, okay, bam, there he is. So it's just a different way to fish a type of bait that, here, grab it, you want it? Nothing like that is a traditional, you know, warm weather bait. You fish it in the cold weather, but it's weight, and you're fishing it on the bottom.
Is that kind of single hook in the belly area there? Or
Yeah. If you come up here afterwards, I'll show you that's actually a jig in there. You can look at the dragon heads. That's a spinnerbait. That is a assassinator clacker spinnerbait, and I will always keep a spinnerbait. People wouldn't think that you use a moving lure in 34-degree water to catch smallmouth. They think, oh, they're lethargic, they're you know, they're slow. You got to fish it low and slow on the bottom. Not always so. Something like a spinnerbait is. Spinnerbaits are magic. They will. Smallmouth in the winter are almost like they're in a trance-like state, like they're sleepwalking. And when they see a spinnerbait, if they're awake enough or alert enough to know that it's there, they can feel the thumping of the blades coming together. They just react to it. They don't think about it. It's just an automatic. And I didn't used to fish these in cold weather, but there was a day that I went out and I actually made my own. I use do-it molds, and I make a lot of my own fishing lures. And I made one, and I put bucktail on there instead of a skirt. And you know, I had not been catching anything. I said, I'm going to try my new thing I've been tinkering with, and I threw it out there, and I caught a fish. And I'm like, no way! And it was in 36, I think it was 36.5-degree water down the Rappahannock River in Virginia. And I kept throwing it, and I was catching fish. I was like, I never would have thought that in this cold water they would go after something moved. Now, I'm not moving it fast. I'm usually moving it in a way that it's on bottom, and I'll throw it out there, and I'll let it sit there on a taut line like a jig. And sometimes when it flutters down, and they'll come down, and they'll stare at it, and maybe you let it sit there a minute. I mean, 60 seconds, not like a minute, but 60 seconds, a long time. As soon as you pick it up off the bottom and you move it maybe a foot and you let it sit back down. As soon as it comes off the bottom and you feel that blade go dum 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 dum, and then you drop it again, when you start moving it again is usually when they jump on it. But really, this time of year, you want to, if you're moving it, you want to move it slow. You want to get it near the bottom. Use your heavier spinnerbaits. This one's 3/4 ounce spinnerbait. In the current, if you're fishing any current, which usually this time of year you're not fishing much, you're going to need that extra weight to get it down on the bottom and really just grind it out. Try to wear the paint off the head of your spinnerbait and let it sit sometimes like it's a jig. This lure right here. My name is Jeff Little, and that is a little tube. I use tubes, and that one is 2 inches long. Here it is right here. And in the winter, they will go after smaller things than they will in the summer. something that small, think of a crayfish that's that big, and think of a smallmouth that's 21, 22 inches waking up from its, winter slumber to get something to eat. That's going to be enough for them. Sometimes when they bite, they go, they'll hit something halfway and they'll rip the back half of it off. If they're just nipping at stuff, you want to go smaller and smaller. And this, I actually put a rattle inside my little tube. So that again is a confidence-based product, but any smaller presentations of tubes will do the job. Looks like I'm wrapping up here shortly, but I'm going to cover one last thing, one last presentation. This is a little bit bigger tube, and this is the lure that I got the one yesterday on, and it's a 3-inch tube rigged on a dragon head. Again, I have the rattle on there. Rigging them on a dragon head is a good way to have fewer snags. If you fish rivers a lot, you'll understand that it's very frustrating to snag your jig and always break them off or have to go after it. And the dragon heads are a great way to avoid having that many snags. The dragon head is the hook with this little weight on there. And the website where you can find that, and you can also find my DVDs, is confidencebaits.net. Okay? I think that's all I got. If you can go ahead and play, I got one episode of the Tightline Junkies Journal. Play the next one. And that is last week's episode. A week ago, right now, this was happening. Please check out the website, tightlinejunkiesjournal.pivotshare.com.